One day the human race will cease to exist. Whether it be wiping ourselves out from killing each other, the sun going out, or a horrible zombie outbreak, the human race does have a shelf life. And personally, I'm hoping for a hostile alien takeover and going out in the blaze of glory. Now, luckily for me, developer Clapfoot brings us Fortified, a wave-based third-person shooter that came out on Wednesday for $14.99 and has a 20% launch discount. Now, can the game capture the magic with gameplay similar to Orcs Must Die? Or will the game turn into an extinction-level event, wiping out before it's able to get through the next wave of gameplay? That's what I'm here to answer, but before I begin, this key was obtained from the developer for the purposes of review. So those who have played Orcs Must Die will find a game that's very similar here in the gameplay department. Now, the idea is simple. Don't let the baddies destroy your rocket ship, indicated by the health icon on the minimap on the top right corner of the screen. If they get there and are able to do enough damage, the game is over. Now, at the start of each match, you are given a bit of money to place down structures that will be used to defend your rocket ship. These traps range from direct damage dealers such as large cannons to more movement restricting traps such as freeze rays. You can also in certain cases place down foot soldiers, which you can direct in battle. In addition, for each of the 4 main heroes, you can bring 2 weapons into battle. Each weapon has a primary and secondary fire and can be modified to have a special property as well. As to the gameplay, the aliens will come in waves, and they will consist of various different types, from the typical spider foot soldier to the explosive aerial spinning bombs. Depending on the type of enemy, they'll either try to attack you or just ignore you altogether to go after the spacecraft. Each enemy has their own strengths and weaknesses as well, and your traps and weapons can counter specific enemies rather nicely. Well, mostly. The freeze ray, for example, has absolutely no weaknesses, it seems, and it's always the fantastic idea to use. Although I use the TNT launcher a little bit more, mostly because it's fun to have ragdoll physics. Now, at first, you'll have a tiny bit of fun. There's something always satisfying to me about killing waves of enemies over and over and over again, and some of the weapons in the game are rather fun to use, like the aforementioned TNT launcher. Now, you'll have to use your minimap constantly as the enemies come from different spawn points, and they can overrun you if you're not careful. But you probably caught the fact that I said "at first" when referring to the game's fun factor. And sadly, one of the biggest problems that developed very quickly for the game is a sense of repetition and a lack of good variety in terms of level design. The game, while trying different map layouts and configurations, doesn't really feel that different from map to map, and frankly, the majority of enemies can be distinguished into 2 main categories, flying and non-flying. Sure, you may get a boss monster at certain points, and the annihilators feel a lot separate from every other enemy in the game, but other than those 2, these enemies are literally cannon fodder. They don't give you a challenge in most cases. The game becomes very repetitive very quickly, and while you should expect some of that in a wave-based shooter, it takes it to the next level here. It doesn't help that the game's characters actually play relatively the same. You think at first that they play rather differently, as characters such as the rocket scientist can use their special abilities to take to the air, getting unlimited ammo and able to fire over and over and over again. But other than that ability, you find that the game doesn't really have a lot of weapon variety, because almost every character gets the same access to the same weapons and structures, just at different points in the leveling system. This hurts the game, as the will of trying something different is stripped out at that point, and it also really doesn't help the characterizations of these characters as a whole. Now, those people who watch the channel a bit know that I prefer the single player experience most of the time over the multiplayer one, and Fortified is the exception to that rule. Playing by yourself is lifeless. The drones come out, you kill them, and there's really no good chaos, at least in my opinion. Even at higher difficulties, wherein you can actually play them due to the strange unlock system, I found myself literally falling asleep, which for a game with a TNT launcher is a major problem. No, this game was designed for co-op and multiplayer in mind, and that's where things get better, and much, much worse. See, the multiplayer ramps up the difficulty as you get more players, and when you have a group of heroes playing with each other, especially friends, you can see the potential this game has. as your team tries to protect your rockets and having everyone run around in chaos trying to keep yourselves alive. This is where the game is at its best, when it's in true chaos, but that doesn't necessarily happen in the single player experience. Let's start with this. There's no custom matchmaking. None at all. If you even plan on playing this game, which I wouldn't recommend at this point, you have to play with friends. If you click on Find Game, it'll put you in the first available match. Not a problem, right? Wrong. What the game doesn't take into account is character levels, map experience, or even difficulty level. You heard me right. When finding a game, you can't select the difficulty you can play. Only when you are the host of the game can you set that difficulty. And when you join a game, you have no way of finding out what the game's details are, which heroes are there, what level they are, what difficulty is the game set to. This leads to frustration as you join a game with 2 AFK players on a hard difficulty. Okay, fine, let me quit and join another game. Only you will immediately join the same one. It doesn't remember jack shit about what servers that you just played on, and you will basically have to let time determine when you try again. This isn't helped by the basic feature set of the multiplayer experience. For some reason, it seems, push to talk is turned off by default. But to be quite honest with you, it seems when I turned it on in the menu, it didn't make much of a difference. I was still saying things in the lobby, for example. I had to actually unplug my mic. And that means you can join a game where Johnny, not really paying attention to what's around him, has music blasting in the background. Alright, that's annoying for video recording. Let me mute him. Oh, I can't. I can't directly mute him. Oh, okay, fine. I'll just quit the match and join another. God damn it, I'm back in the same game. The same problem that I mentioned before. Now, this immediately pissed me off and made me not want to play the game again. These are features that you have to have in a game like this. To not have them is asking for trouble. And then there's the actual game experience. Due to the lack of reasonable matchmaking and whatnot, you can run into major problems with difficulty, which is a little weird because the single player is rather easy even on harder difficulties. And the balance curve for players, it's all out of whack. When adding more players, especially in the middle of the match, it seems to adjust the difficulty of the enemies. But it also doesn't necessarily give you money for traps that a player at the start of the game would have. Now this makes the game harder and the balance is broken, but even then, the difficulty curve when adding players even at the start of the match is still out of whack. I had one game that 4 players won on, mostly because the 4th added just as we won the match. You get overwon way too quickly with 4 people, robots take way too many shots at times to take down, and your team can't keep up. It's just not possible at times. And that's if the game doesn't glitch out on you first. For example, I was somehow able to launch an enemy up here thanks to the TNT launcher and some ragdoll physics. That's actually rather normal in this game in terms of enemies, ragdolling into places that you shouldn't expect them at this point. But the fact of the matter was, most of my compadres had weapons that couldn't actually hit him. Most of them were straight weapons in terms of things like rifles or laser beams, and I was the only one who had a weapon that had an arc on it. So here's me trying to throw TNT up there to try to hit this enemy behind some, other structures at this point. It took me 10, 15 minutes in order for me to do this, and the fact was, that enemy was out of bounds. Why wasn't he respawned? I don't like being this direct in terms of the criticisms I make about games. I like to be a positive critic, saying that, this has a problem, but it could have some fixes in terms of the implementation, for example. But in this one case, I do have to question the QA that was put into this game, in particular in the multiplayer element. There are so many issues with, bots having AI that sticks in corners that doesn't do anything. The connection issues at times where you get some bad lag and you have no idea what's going on. The difficulty curves with the number of players that are added. It seems like these are issues that needed a little bit more time in the oven to actually fix. And I do wonder why the game launched in this state. Yes, the single player is mostly working, but in terms of the multiplayer, there's just so little there in terms of features, in terms of quality, that I just wonder what the hell is going on. And I can apply that to more than the multiplayer experience. For example, the story elements of the game, I do wonder what happened to them. At the start, you get a little bit of an introduction with a nice sort of, I don't want to say 60s theme, but an old America theme, wartime theme. And I like those introductions, and I wanted more of those story elements. And then they seem to disappear. You get one other cutscene a little bit later on, but all the characterization goes out the window. And in particular, in-game characterization, my god, the voice acting. Not that voice acting is bad, but the one-liners. They just repeat over and over and over and over and over and over again. And in particular, at the end credit, where you're like, okay, we are going to go and blast off, we've won the match. It's the same line over and over again. I got so sick of it, I just turned off the voice entirely at one point. And sadly, it could have complemented the reasonable aesthetic here. Yeah, the characters are a little bit cliche, but in terms of this wartime theme, it worked rather nice. I like the colors here, I like the designs of the characters here. And I did like the aliens in particular. They felt, B-movie campish at this point, and I think that's what the game was going for in a certain extent. There are some weird elements with weird fogs and some, textures that I wouldn't say are the greatest of quality, but the aesthetic here for the most part worked. It looks like a nice game. It's just the fact that everything around it seems to fail. Fortified is a game that really, really disappointed me, and the fact of the matter is, I still see its potential in there trying to come out. The fact is that the level design isn't that great in terms of variety. The characters could use a little bit more uniqueness between them. And the fact of the matter is that I need a little bit more content for weapons. I need a little bit more content in terms of what the game has to offer, even at the $15 price tag. The game feels very early access. There's a great concept here, and the fact is that the basics of the game work, but it needed a lot more refinement. It needed that feedback, and it needed the QA to really take the game to the next level, and that didn't happen here. Basic multiplayer features where if you play the game a couple of times, you'd realize, wait a minute, something's not right here. I need to add, a mute button. I need to add the ability to find specific people in terms of criteria. It just needs more. Alright, this is Dragonix signing out. I hope you got an idea of what Fortified had to offer. I will leave my Steam review in the description below. If you have any questions for me, I would be more than happy to answer them. Again, if you liked this video and found it useful, like it, share it with a friend, and I will see you guys later. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button in the middle of the screen. The last video I did will be in the top left, and a related video to this will be in the top right. I do have a Twitter handle at the bottom left, and a Facebook page at the bottom right. And of course, you can always subscribe to the Google Plus portion. Anyway, thanks for watching, and keep on gaming.